Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Jim Stroud Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Special guest, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Jim. Thank you. I am Eric Wissig. I am part of the team at SureCo, and we are implementing and moving forward with a new benefits model that moves employees and employers out of the traditional group structure and into one where individuals own their own plan, but the employer still supports them financially and fortunately on a pre-tax basis.
That is very interesting to a lot of people these days, as we are in interesting times. Now, what you're describing, is that the Individual Coverage HRA, ICHRA, as I call it?
Correct. Yeah. It's the ICHRA model that came online definitively in 2020. And the variety of organizations have been moving forward on the movement of, hey, this is the new path. And the old model is just not cutting it anymore.
What are the overall benefits towards the worker and for the company for that matter?
Yeah, so there's a few different ones. The predominant movement right now is because group health insurance has been getting so expensive, and the rate increases in group health insurance have been astronomical year over year for quite some time now. Employers are seeing an opportunity to move to ICHRA, and they're able to save money, and they're save money not for the company, but also be able to traditionally help employees save money by picking a plan that fits them. That cost savings isn't the only opportunity for benefit for people moving to this model, because in this model you have a large variety of choice where an individual can find what fits them and align with what physicians they need, what their cost structure is, as opposed to in a group model, they're trying to find kind of what fits the average. And so often nothing quite fits quite what they need.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing in that is that they don't have to pay for stuff people don't need. Like if I was getting insured, I wouldn't need pregnancy, and I wouldn't need an OBGYN. So there's that. Do you think people will be overwhelmed by all the choices that ICHRA, ICHRA offers?
Left to their own, hey guys, go figure it out. Go pick your own. Do it by yourself. Probably, right? Because
Hmm.
when you look at any one area, you might have four or five, maybe more different insurance companies, and then each one of them could provide and offer 12 or so different plans that you can pick from. And so, one, trying to find who is available and then where to go for their plans without support from the employer and tools to be able to use, it could be very overwhelming, definitely.
Hmm. I'm wondering too, I know that a lot of companies already have close relationships with certain insurance companies after working with them for so many years, and now this newfangled ICHRA ICHRA comes in. How does that impact things?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because obviously group health plans have been the dominant structure. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of organizations that have group health plans with specific carriers that have been together for quite some time. And you definitely see where the insurance companies are concerned about, hey, what happens if people broadly move to this individual based model? How do we adjust and have a strategy that doesn't harm their business? And so you do see kind of this, hey, how do we partner with those moving to the ICHRA model without and transition people to an individual structure without causing disruption, both with the company, the broker, who's a very important component, and then recognizing that the group structure is now not the only option. Maybe not completely going away, but not the only option. So insurance companies, the predominant group of insurance companies, are wrestling with this question of how do we embrace ICHRA, but not completely uproot our group structure as we transition. The insurance companies that haven't had a dominant group offering are leaning in full tilt into ICHRA because they're predominantly ICHRA or individual, and so they're embracing that as an avenue to gain business in the group employer market.
Hmm. What kind of feedback have you received so far? I'm curious.
Feedback from the companies
Yeah,
or
both, actually, both sides.
yeah, so the company level, I mean, they're very um, grateful, I guess, in a way that there's a new model to not only save money, but to establish a new model in which they can determine and control costs. And so in the ICHRA model, a company effectively is going from creating a health plan and determining the health options for their employees to establishing more a true compensation model. How much do we want to provide in financial support for their employees to pick their own plan? And so it's more of a shift into, all right, we provide a call it inflationary adjustment to your base comp every year. Now, what sort of adjustment do we want to make to your benefit compensation, as opposed to trying to determine what the health experience should be? So employers embrace that. The model itself, though, the feedback, as you kind of alluded to, could be complicated. And so it's a very big shift for an employer, and specifically HR, to adjust from, hey, we create the plan to now we don't create the plan. What do we create? We create a contribution structure. And for an HR team, that can be an adjustment, but that's where we come in and we facilitate and help that transition. So once you get through that and you get a few months into the plan year on an ICHRA, often the feedback is this has been an amazing transition, but it is a transition, right?
Yeah.
Um, brokers are not that dissimilar, right? So brokers have had a bit of an evolution in the market. When it came online, it was not familiar. And so people, often a broker reaction would be, yeah, I'm not sure this is for my companies, and then it was, well, maybe it's for a few of them, maybe this
Hmm.
makes sense. We have a few that might benefit from this. And now it's much more broadly becoming, we need to look at this. And this might be something that much broader cross section of the book of business makes sense. But again, not necessarily everybody.
Yeah. What do you think of this scenario? Now, I know a lot of people, well, the model used to be for a lot of folks, you have a 9 to 5 and you're there forever and you get all your benefits from that one employer. Nowadays, a lot of people are working at least 2 jobs because, times are interesting, as I like to
Mm-hmm.
say, right? So how does this ICHRA factor in if somebody's working 9 to 5 one place and then a 6 to 10 another place? Do they get double insurance coverage, twice the coverage with this, or how does that
But
work?
not necessarily.
Okay.
And so the first question that I think is still yet to be answered is ICHRA is only available for W-2 to 2 employees. So
Okay.
it's not an opportunity for more contract type gig type workers. And I think there's an opportunity to solve that question, but it hasn't been answered yet. So if you have a 9 to 5, then you have a second job, you could potentially get to, but there's the eligibility structure can be determined by the company, and they are required to offer affordable benefits per the ACA
Mm,
if the company is of a certain size and you're working a certain amount, right? And so in that point, then you're offered a career. If you're working part-time at a second job, that employer isn't required to necessarily provide part-time employees the same requirements under the ACA. Now, if you're working 2 full-time jobs, which goodness, that's quite a task,
quite a bit.
right?
Yeah.
You would be, both companies would be subject to ACA requirements and then therefore have to provide affordable healthcare to them.
Okay. Okay. So ICHRA is something that the company would introduce to the employer, or should the employee say, "Hey, you heard about this new ICHRA thing? Can we get on that?"
It's both. We encourage employees, especially this year, as there's been a lot of disruption on rates and increases to begin asking these questions. Don't just assume that we should just keep doing what we're doing, stay in the plan they're in. And as people are being introduced and exposed to a new ICHRA model, ask HR, have they heard about it? They probably have. It's now been around for a few years, and they've, even if they're not familiar, they've probably caught wind of it at the company level. And the HR team, if they haven't really explored it, they should ask their broker or call us directly. But we partner with we partner with the company's broker across the board. And so we encourage them to ask their broker about it, tell the broker, hey, we heard about this SureCo, and we typically would engage with the broker and then partner to bring this to the company.
How would things look to a worker in terms of rolling this out? Do they sign all the forms day one, they become an official employee? Is it something they do every year or quarterly? How does that process change, if at all?
Yeah. So the onboarding experience of a new hire is not all that dissimilar to what happens to today if there's a group structure. The difference is that they go through our platform, and maybe they have a platform before, but there's many more options for them to pick. And so they're really looking and they're evaluating their needs, but they're going through their option. They're picking a plan. They might also have other benefits that they then would select and come up with a benefit package. You know, they would essentially check out in a shopping experience, and from there we would take over as the administrator, do all the enrollment, do all the facilitation. We also support the employer from a payments and flow of money to ensure that the individual's plan gets paid. So from an individual employee, the experience is not all that different than the enrollment in a group experience. In an open enrollment scenario where a company moves from from a group structure to an ICHRA structure, there's a need for a transitionary education information exercise for the employer to bring that group into this structure. But at the same time, it's not an unfamiliar experience. They get invited to go into for open enrollment to start. They log into our platform, and then we kind of just walk them through the selection process. And so it's not the feedback we get is that it's very easy. And for people, there's a cross section, as everyone knows, there's a cross section of people that have specific needs or maybe are in a high utilization situation. And in that, there's a need to make sure that whatever plan they select has adequate coverage for what they need. And so that can be difficult on your own. And so we will assist people in either through one-on-one consultations or back and forth email coordination to make sure that they're not misinterpreting what's in the plans that they're selecting.
Okay. I'm curious about them. I'm glad I was able to ask you all these questions. I'm curious about this other thing too. So I've worked for enterprise level companies before, and I've worked for smaller startups before, and the benefits offered in both situations are drastically different. How does ICHRA help? Does that help? Does it help the smaller startup type companies compete with the enterprise level companies benefits wise?
I would say definitely, right? And
Okay.
there's cross sections of the market, as everybody kind of is aware of. And so when you look at the under 50, a startup under 50, ICHRA is a very, I guess, flexible, convenient type of easy to implement, and even not that challenging to administer when you have, say, 10 people. As you climb up the maturity and the size, as you cross over 50 and then you cross over the 100, you then also are subject to ACA requirements. So now you have the requirements to make sure you are providing affordable healthcare. ICHRA, as it came out, is a very robust with a lot of flexibility on how you can create a contribution structure for your employees, how you can group employees, and how you can customize a offering for the population. There is a question, I will say, and on many of the larger employers, and when I say larger, it's 100, 200 and above that we're working with, and that's really where SureCo specializes. As you get up into more of the 100, 200, there's a self-funded model that they're coming from. And the self-funded model over the last several years has been adopted by smaller and smaller organizations. And so a self-funded model for a 200 person company is very different than a 10,000 person company. And so as you climb up the size spectrum, it's a much more complicated question on a transition from a self-funded group plan to an ICHRA model. But in a 200 person company, it usually makes a lot of sense, even though they're on a self-funded program.
That is interesting. Now, I'm thinking that the options that are given are pretty traditional, but are there any non-traditional options for the individual? For example, I know that a lot of people are assisting aging parents, and that could be a very attractive benefit for a lot of people. So startup companies want to compete with the large enterprises in terms of benefits. There may be a benefit they could maybe offer, which would be attractive to a lot of people, I think. Does ICHRA offer things like that? And if so, what other kind of non-traditional healthcare benefits are included?
Hey, there's two, I guess, unique components that ICHRA brings to the organization as an opportunity. The focus currently is on individual coverage premium, monthly premium. But ICHRA came on in which there's the opportunity to reimburse any qualified medical expenses per the IRS qualified medical expense list. Monthly premium is just one that's been approved to be reimbursed. So when you look at somebody's healthcare experience, there is an opportunity for an organization to provide a benefit that supports, say, out-of-pocket costs related to services they're receiving applied to their deductible, in addition to medical premium, right? And so you can combine kind of a package that says, hey, we're going to financially support you. We're going to help you on premium, but we potentially going to help you on copays and other types of out-of-pocket costs. The other unique thing about ICHRA is employers can now provide reimbursement to their Medicare enrolled employees. So as people are shifting from a group plan or an ICHRA plan and crossing into Medicare eligibility and electing Medicare, employers can say, we're providing a pre-tax contribution for you to apply that to your monthly expense for Medicare, which is very unique and one of the very attractive ICHRA offerings as employers, especially those who have that population are shifting over to.
Sure. Another sort of weird question. Would pet care, veterinarian care be an option as well? Because I know that a lot of people really love their pets, their fur babies, as they're called, and they see them as part of the family. And taking care of pets can be expensive, especially as they become older. I'm thinking dogs in particular, and those costs can add up. Would that be one of the options? Would that be an ICHRA option, I guess?
So the way to look at that is ICHRA is isolated to the individual health coverage and the incurred expenses for that. But what we're seeing is as you point out, we're seeing people interested in, pet insurance type products or other ancillary, maybe wellness products. What we're seeing is there are employers that are not just pocketing these savings or redeploying it into other areas of the business. They're keeping those savings in their benefit package and reallocating them to other offerings and supporting employees to help gain their pet insurance, or in often what you see is they're redeploying those dollars into more robust contribution for 401k and retirement. And that's where you kind of see the HR team essentially saying, how do we offer a more robust package? Um, because we're benefiting by implementing ICHRA, and we're controlling our costs and saving money.
Okay. For the cynical, miserly types that are hearing all these potential options, would you say ICHRA is more of a way of giving employees more choice, or is it more of a way of employers controlling costs? Because I can imagine someone thinking, that sounds great, but I'm not made of money.
Yep, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. There's a concern
Mm,
that an employer would say, hey, I'm going to ICHRA and it's not my problem anymore, guys. You know, Employees, it's on you. We're just going to give you money, you go figure it out. There is a concern, and they'll say, I don't want my employee base to feel like we're dumping them into this individual world, and they're on their own. And then
mm,
therefore they need to figure things out. The cost savings and choice are actually correlated and connected to each other, because cost savings from an individual market to the group market as a just like for like difference currently
yeah.
has a savings component. But the company can also save money by helping employees find what fits them best. And so often people will over insure because they're concerned about, say, a deductible plan, et cetera. If a healthy person over insures, they're probably overspending on something they don't need. And so, because there's a broader variety of choice in multiple carriers, people can find something of lower cost that fits their needs that might not be available in the group plan. And so, you see savings in that regard. So, the choice component is one that is very strong, but isn't really necessarily the driving force at this point, because the cost of traditional group has become such a pain point.
Okay. Hopefully that answers the questions for the people going, bah, humbug.
No,
Are there
absolutely.
any legal landmines, any HR compliance issues companies to be worried about when you're switching from traditional to ICHRA?
There absolutely. ICHRA does not get the company out of the traditional requirements from, say, an ERISA perspective or an ACA requirement perspective. They
Mm,
still need to pay attention to making sure, for example, a big cautionary is to make sure you don't cross over the non-discrimination rules. You can get an employer that says, hey, we have this subset of, say, executives that we want to offer a completely different contribution structure than everybody else. And at that point, you start dancing with these non-discrimination thresholds that you need to be very careful of. You also need to follow the ACA requirements. And so affordability is a very important one that we, on every case, go through a very robust assessment to make sure that what they are contributing does qualify as affordable care under the ACA requirements across the whole spectrum, because you really can't have people without affordable coverage when you're required to do it. Right.
yeah, okay. In that regard, what about people with chronic conditions or pre-existing conditions? How does that factor in? Because if someone has a pre-existing condition and they hear that they're switching, we're going from traditional to ICHRA, that's gonna, make them feel a certain way. So
Yeah.
can you talk to that?
No, absolutely. So what's interesting is 10 years ago, when this movement kind of first kicked off, and it was when I started jumping in well before the ICHRA regulation came online. It was realized, and we realized, that the ACA, through its requirement to cover pre-existing conditions without that being factored into price, is one of the things that really facilitated the ability for employers to transition to allowing employees to provide to purchase individual plans. And the reason for that is because insurance companies were now required to cover pre-existing conditions and not just ratchet up the rate to make it unaffordable. So when somebody is on a group plan currently now and they have a chronic condition that they need to manage, and pre-ACA, when they would lose that group coverage and say they expired COBRA, they're in a tough spot pre-ACA. Now they can shift to an individual plan post COBRA, and it's not cheap. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a full premium price for an individual plan, but it's not tied to the fact that they have a chronic condition and therefore they're going to tie their premium to that. That was one of the big shifts with the ACA that essentially enabled the ability for ICHRA to become feasible. So when you're on a group plan and you have a condition, the real consideration is how do you ensure that you're going to an insurance carrier and into a plan that allows for adequate coverage of your condition? And typically that would then be, what are the benefits in regards to the condition that you're continuously needing to manage? So it's very much, in those situations, a lot of people would prefer not to change provider and physician. And so how do we work through to maintain continuity and find the plans that have that? And it's interesting because where you see employees really start to chew on a consumerism type choice is you will have people who absolutely don't want to change doctors. And so you'll work through the available plans, and there is a plan that has their doctor, but maybe that's the most expensive plan. And so then the wheels start turning. I like my doctor, but is it worth an additional $300 a month to stay with this doctor? Maybe there's other alternatives. And so the question becomes, how do we arm individuals to make those decisions? How do we support them to find that, hey, changing the physician you're moving to is not going to deteriorate your experience because they're of a high caliber and you shouldn't be worried about it.
I think this is going to make insurance companies more competitive with each other. If the individual can pick and choose what they want instead of just having to deal with what's available. What do you think?
You're touching on what we believe is a catalyst to help moving health or the healthcare system in the United States in a new direction and hopefully in a better direction. And so there's a broad perspective that a consumerism-based model where the individual is armed with making informed, value-driven choices will force the rest of the healthcare environment to accommodate that shift. If you look traditionally, it has not been that. The individual has been more of a ride along to the overall system, right? And so as we move people to a consumer-based model, what we're seeing is the health insurance companies adjusting to how do we embrace this model and how do we even grow our business in the individual market. In order to do that, they need to find product, i.e. plans that people want to buy. And so a lot of our conversations across the insurance carriers is how do they gain the information to determine what people want, which to us is wildly exciting because that then begins the momentum to shift to a consumer-based model, which hopefully then opens up other areas of healthcare for people to now say, hey, I'm a physician, I need to now pay attention to this. I'm a facility, how do I pay attention to this? And so the movement, the excitement of ICHRA and what we're doing and the passion of our team is playing one role and being part of helping fix this. Not fixing everything naturally, but like if we can be a small catalyst to move it along, that's exciting.
I hope that new direction makes it all more affordable for all concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Thank you so much for your time. If someone wanted to contact you with even more questions, because I'm sure there are questions I did not ask, and someone says, "Oh, ask this question, ask that question," how can they find you online and continue the conversation?
Yeah, no, the easiest way is the SureCo website, which is sureco.com, SURECO.com. All of our contact information is there. Our team is there to support, and then also ask your broker about ICHRA, and we work with the majority, so it's not unlikely they know how to find us as well.
Great. And make it easier, I'll put all of that in the podcast description. So if you're listening, go to the podcast description, it's right there for you. Thank you so much, sir. I do appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the Jim Stroud Podcast.
Thank you very much, Jim. Happy to be here.
Well, my time is up. I thank you for yours. I'll see you again real soon right here with a brand new episode of the Jim Stroud Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached by email at jimstroud@jimstroud.com. And one last favor, if I may ask, please rate this podcast. 5 stars is preferred, but please comment with your honest opinion. I really appreciate that. All right? Okay, until next time, bye-bye.